Africa I want.
That is the Africa I want. That is the Africa I want.
This is the Africa we want.
Let us unite to build the Africa we want. Visit www.au.int to learn more about Agenda 2063.
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want.
African women have been called a powerful, untapped economic force. And Africa's Aspiration 6 of Agenda 2063 emphasizes the need to include African women in all aspects of the continent's development in order to achieve our goal for gender equality and parity by strengthening the role of women in all spheres of life: political, economic and social, as well as eliminating all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls. The African Union recognizes that gender equality is a fundamental human right and an integral part of regional integration, economic growth and social development, and that Africa will only achieve the ambitions laid out in Agenda 2063 if the lot of girls and women on the continent is attended to. This is not only stated as a mandate of the Union in the Constitutive Act, but reinforced in the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa and several human rights treaties, such as the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, which requires African countries to combat all forms of discrimination against women through appropriate legislative measures, and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. The voice of African women is represented as the highest level of the African Union, with the issues of women being placed at the forefront within the office of the chairperson of the African Union Commission, through the Women, Gender and Development Directorate, which is the department at the forefront of leading, guiding and advocating for the inclusion of women and girls in all spheres of African society. The Directorate implements its activities through two divisions. the Gender Policy and Development Division, and the Gender Coordination and Outreach Division. Through these divisions, the department focuses on issues affecting women such as poverty reduction, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, agriculture and food security, women's health, maternal mortality and HIV/AIDS, education, science and technology, impact of environment and climate change, peace and security, violence against women, governance and legal protection, financial inclusion, advocating for youth, and placing women in decision-making positions in both private and public sector.
We are responsible for integrating gender equality and women's empowerment in all the work of the Union, and in particular the African Union as an organ, but also other organs like the Pan-African Parliament, the court, and all the organs. And of course, working with the RECs, which is very critical because the RECs are somewhere strategically placed in between the Union and its citizens. And of course, we cannot leave out member states, because that's where a lot of issues concerning women's empowerment and gender equality are taking place, and that's where change, is particularly required. Over the years, we have seen a lot of progress being made in the promulgation of laws, development of policies that promote women's rights or gender equality and women's empowerment. We have very progressive and comprehensive and really groundbreaking pieces of laws, but there's still a huge deficit between promulgation and implementation. And this is where we come in again as the Women, Gender and Development Directorate. We have also seen over the years achievement in the institutions, governmental institutions, whose mandates are to protect and to promote women's rights and gender equality and women's empowerment. We have seen, for example, a number of ministries who are mandated specifically to work on women's issues or gender issues. We have seen the establishment of specific national human rights institutions like gender commissions. We have a few of them in a number of African Union member states, like in Uganda, we have in South Africa and many others. It is very important for us to speak, to make a call to the 13 member states that have not ratified Maputo Protocol to do so in this year, 2020. And this is important because in 2010, when member states declared 2010 to 2020 as the African Women's Decade and focusing much more on grassroots development, they committed that by 2020 there will be universal ratification, universal implementation, and universal domestication of Maputo Protocol. So we'll really look forward to seeing many more member states coming into the party and ratifying Maputo Protocol, and those who have ratified actually taking a step further and domesticating Maputo Protocol through their courts, through legislation, and then implementing Maputo Protocol as well, so the women and the young girls in the continent are able to benefit.
The activities of the African Union related to promoting the rights of women and girls are anchored in the African Union Strategy for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. The strategy focuses on 6 key pillars: women's economic empowerment and sustainable development, which are key to promoting growth, prosperity, and sustainability; social justice, protection, and women's rights, recognizing that women's rights are human rights spanning all spheres.
Excellence, Monsieur le Président.
Political, legal.
Your Excellency, the President, do I have your permission to begin our proceedings?
Merci.
Thank you, distinguished guests, honorable members, Your Excellency, the President of the Pan-African Parliament, Your Excellencies, members of the Pan-African Parliament Bureau, Your Excellencies, members and chairpersons of bureaus of committees of the Pan-African Parliament, Your Excellency, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Egypt, Your Excellency, Ms. Gituku, and the representatives of UN agencies, distinguished guests, thank you for being present with us this afternoon to celebrate the International Women's Day. I am pleased to be facilitating this opening this day. We will have 4 presentations. The program is being distributed, and we apologize. We did not have electricity this morning, so we're not able to print it out. However, there are people in the room distributing it to you. I mentioned that the opening ceremony will have some presentations or remarks that will set the tone for what we'll be discussing during this afternoon. I would like to invite the chairperson of the Women's Caucus, Honorable Yaya, to make her welcoming remarks.
Très honorable Président.
The Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable chairpersons and members of the bureaus of the Pan-African Parliament's committees, the Dean of Accredited Ambassadors in the Republic of South Africa, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Egypt in the Republic of South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of UN agencies, the representative of the European Union, honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament, distinguished guests, the dear staff of the Pan-African Parliament. Before I make my remarks, allow me to seize this opportunity this afternoon to wish each and every one of you here present, as well as the entire parliamentarian community, excellent International Women's Day 2023. I hope that each one of you receives, on behalf of the Bureau of the Women's Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament and all the members of Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament, led by His Excellency Chief Fortune Chirumbera, the expression of our sincere gratitude for having honored us with your presence at this meeting, which is a gathering that will enable us to discuss issues that impede the full development of women and young women in Africa in a context that is characterized by gender inequalities. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to recall that the theme of this celebration is for an inclusive digital world, innovation and technologies for gender equality, a theme that fits in with the theme of the CSW that is taking place currently in New York, whose theme is innovation and technological changes, as well as education in the digital era to attain gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment. Despite the socio-economic challenges that women and girls face, nobody can overlook the contribution of African women in the development of our continent. Women are marginalized, stigmatized, abused, harassed, and discriminated. Yet, women of this African continent are faced with the worst nightmare of their existence in this 21st century. However, they remain the center of gravity of the entire African society. The numerous legal instruments, both regional and international, that protects women are far from improving the lot of women. Equality that is meant to ensure progress for each woman seems to be a utopia for many of them. And men do not seem willing to assist. In many areas, women are seeing their rights being eroded. They are now facing challenges including the digital divide, where women are disadvantaged, where new ICTs are essential for their development today. The developments of digital technologies in Africa is hampered by structural difficulties, including a lack of access to electricity, low bandwidth, inadequate infrastructure, and a weak policy and regulatory environment, as well as a limited capacity of individuals to come up with digital solutions. It would be good to note that over 300 million women are far away from fiber optic cables and internet connectivity. So high-speed internet is generally not close to women, which is a key bottleneck, particularly for people who are living in rural areas or remote areas. They're not able to tap into the potential of digital transformation. The potential of digital applications, the COVID crisis has really underscored the digital divide between men and women. 3.6 billion individuals are not connected to the internet globally. 900 million are found in Africa, according to the European Investment Bank. Only 15% among women who have access to internet are able to use this internet in the sub-Saharan African continent. There was 33% internet penetration for women, and the gap between sexes was 20.7%. Lack of harmonization of digital data, as well as lack of tools and methodologies to guide women on data in agri-business, as well as the AU strategy on gender equality, highlights the critical constraints linked to social and cultural barriers that give priority to boys and men when it comes to technology use in homes, as well as online gender-based violence, the restriction of movement and limitations to access of digital tools. So social norms are still barriers that are being disseminated in addition to other challenges that impede the use of mobile technologies and other technologies by women. Lastly, lack of relevant content and lack of participation of women in sector decision making, and particularly in the technological sector, as well as the absence of relevant policies, constitute obstacles to the equality to ICTs and technologies in Africa. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, given this gloomy picture of the digital divide and gender inequality in Africa, it is important to launch a call to African countries to action to promote the development of inclusive digital technologies. They need to enhance gender equality to transform agro-business systems in Africa. Consequently, it is important that governments and parliaments give priority to their national strategies on the development of digital technologies to assist women and girls to get capital to become leaders, business women, as well as positive change agents. And their role in climate change cannot be ignored. Digital tools for agriculture that takes into account gender equality necessitates positive and a commitment from governments to resolve inequalities between the sexes that affect boys and girls in rural areas in a disproportionate manner. We need to develop favorable policy frameworks as well as incentives or affirmative action for private sector. The Sustainable Development Goals should guide investments in the development of digital tools. All these tools should be assessed based on their access and their potential, and nobody should be left behind. The capacity to provide jobs as well as to provide boys and girls equal chances to get employment and to build their careers in ICT are some of the challenges that we should be looking at. In science, mathematics, technology, and engineering sectors, we need to ensure that we bridge the gap between girls and boys, men and women, and in both rural and urban areas. It is for this reason that African governments should confirm their commitment to reducing the digital divide as well as gender inequalities. They need to ensure that these services are affordable and that capacities are strengthened, including financial services to reduce the gap. And I would like to make an appeal to the African Union Commission to fast-track the digital transformation strategy on the continent. To conclude, I would like to invite the sisters of the continent to double their courage to fight gender inequalities, and specifically those that are linked to digital technologies and social inclusion. This opportunity has been given to us while we commemorate the International Women's Day. It should be an opportunity to come up with appropriate proposals for African policymakers to reverse the trend and achieve gender equality that is fundamental for the socio-economic development of our continent. To conclude, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the government of the Republic of South Africa, as well as the people of South Africa, for their warm hospitality towards the parliamentarians at this Pan-African Parliament, as well as other guests. Long live Pan-African Parliament, long live African Union, long live African women. Thank you for your kind attention.
Merci, Honorable Présidente.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, for your statement. Now I invite the technical staff to beam the video message of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres, Antonio Guterres. Thank you.
On International Women's Day, we celebrate the achievements of women and girls across all walks of life in all corners of the world. But we also recognize the enormous obstacles they face, from structural injustices, marginalization, and violence, to cascading crises that affect them first and worst, to denial of their personal autonomy and rights over their bodies and lives. Gender-based discrimination harms everyone, women, girls, men, and boys. International Women's Day is a call to action. Actions to stand with women while demanding their fundamental rights at great personal cost. Action to strengthen protection against sexual exploitation and abuse. And action to accelerate women's full participation and leadership. This year's theme stresses the need for technology and innovation to advance gender equality. Technology can expand pathways to education and opportunities for women and girls. But it can also be used to amplify abuse and hatred. Today, women make up under a third of the workforce in science, technology, engineering, and maths. And when women are underrepresented in developing new technologies, discrimination may be baked in from the start. That is why we must close the digital divide and increase the representation of women and girls in science and technology. Women's exclusion from the digital world has shaved an estimated $1 trillion from the GDP of low and middle income countries in the last decade, a loss that could grow to $1.5 trillion by 2025 without action. Investing in women uplifts all people, communities, and countries. Let us work together across governments, the private sector, and civil society to build a more inclusive, just, and prosperous world for women, girls, men, and boys everywhere.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Sur cette note,
after listening to this message that is putting in place the framework and also indicating the challenges facing women throughout the world, I have the privilege and the honor to invite His Excellency Zapaike, who is the Dean of African Ambassadors accredited to South Africa, to deliver his message. Thank you very much, Excellency.
Merci.
Thank you very much. It is for me a privilege to be with you today. Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament, Chief Fortune Chirungira, Honorable members of the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable members of the Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. I am here to support this event in the name of the African Diplomatic Corps. I would like to take this opportunity, since I was entrusted with this mission, to convey to you the greetings of all the African Diplomatic Corps accredited to South Africa. Also, I would like to wish, on behalf of the African Diplomatic Corps, a very good celebration of the International Women's Day. I would like to take this opportunity to convey our encouragements to the Honorable President of PAP, to the Bureau and all the members, to convey the encouragements of the Diplomatic Corps. And I would like to say that we have to continue the actions undertaken already, that indeed has an impact throughout the continent. Your actions you are undertaking for the basic rights of women and for the promotion of women in general. The fact that we have organized this day means that we recognize the important role of women in the efforts aiming at developing our continent. I think that everyone can see the important role played on a daily basis in our lives. In rural areas, in order to get water, it is very often women that gets it. Also, to get food, it is through women. To buy resources and commodities, it is also through women. The Pan-African Parliament, which represents the African peoples in their diversity, is the best institution to defend the interests of women in the continent and to develop and promote their rights. Honorable President, the African woman remains, in spite of everything, the first, and in spite of her important role, is the first victim of the plagues that strike our continent. She is very often subject to marginalization. Someone said previously in a statement that we have to include systematically in all delegations in charge of negotiating peace. Very often we can see delegations that go to make and carry out peace negotiations, but we don't see any women in these delegations. And very often the men who are negotiating are the ones who create those conflicts. I won't be very long. I would like to say simply that what you are doing is very good, and you have to continue your efforts. You can rely on the African Diplomatic Corps accredited in South Africa. We are the diplomatic group, which is the biggest. We are the which includes the largest number. We represent almost all the continent, and we are trying to strengthen the collaboration links and bonds with the Pan-African Parliament. I would like to thank the President for his support, since he is very available and supports us in our efforts to strengthen and reinforce the relationship between the Pan-African Parliament and the African Diplomatic Corps here, accredited in South Africa. I wish you a very good celebration, and let's continue working together hand in hand. And also, we have to set as a target that before leaving this room, we should not forget that women in general, and the African women, is stigmatized and marginalized, and that Africa will not move ahead, will not evolve as planned if our sisters, our mothers, aunts, and so on and so forth are not part and parcel of such efforts. And if we don't recognize their important role they have to play. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Excellent.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your statement. I have now the privilege to invite the President of the Pan-African Parliament to deliver his opening speech, and in order to launch our celebrations. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We expect you to be more jovial since it's a special day. Although away in New York, let me recognize the United Nations Secretary General for having at least sent some message to us. May I recognize the presence of the Bureau of the Pan-African Parliament, the presidents of the PAP's Women's Caucus, Honorable Amina Tijaniaya, the chairperson of the Committee on Gender Equality, Youth and People with Disabilities, Honorable Dao Gabala Mariam, honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament, Excellency, His Excellency, the Dean of the African Diplomatic Corps in the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Ambassador Andre Zapayeke. And we have His Excellency, the Ambassador of Egypt to South Africa, Excellency Ahmed El Fadli. Any other dignitaries that may be in this room, our acting clerk, Mr. Gali, our distinguished partners, UNAIDS, represented or leading a team in the Director General of UNAIDS, and Gituku Shongwe. You are welcome with your team. And the UNESCO team, UN Women, WFP, UNFPA, our resource persons, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start my remarks by a revealing quotation from Gloria Steinem, a world-renowned feminist journalist and activist who said, "The story of women's struggle for equality belongs to no single feminist or to any one organization, but to the collective efforts of all who care about human rights." This quotation is indeed revealing because quite often in the struggle for gender equality, we lose sight of the fact that the right to equality, equity, non-discrimination is a basic human right in the same mode as the right to life, right to shelter, and right to human dignity. The commemoration of the International Women's Day should therefore be a timely reminder to all of us that to deny any woman or girl or child any rights on the basis of their gender is to subvert the inalienable human right that's accorded to us all by virtue of simply being human. The International Women's Day is celebrated across the globe on the 8th of March as the high point or the climax day in each year for the women's rights movement to bring attention to the progress made on gender equality in all its manifestations, including reproductive rights, gender-based violence, abuse against women, and economic rights, among others. For this year, the theme, and I quote, "For an inclusive digital world, innovation and technologies for gender equality," end of quote. You see, this theme refocuses our attention on one of the critical areas in which women are sorely underrepresented. In our quest for accelerated development, in our quest for accelerated economic development, especially in the work of the debilitating effects of COVID-19 pandemic, the majority of our member states have adopted science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which is called STEM, STEM, as a catalytic driving factor in the post-COVID economic recovery. Sadly, one of the major criticisms of STEM has to do with gender disparity in students who graduate with STEM degrees and enter careers related to these fields. Research has shown that women are far less likely to graduate in a STEM degree or enter a career in STEM compared to their male counterparts. African women are even less likely to find the encouragement they need to pursue STEM careers as a result of patriarchal system, which believes that the place of a woman is in the home, not in the science laboratory. A research conducted by the Marville University in the United States of America revealed that the gender gap is especially pronounced in the computer science, with only 19% of computer science degrees awarded to women in 2020. The statistics do not get any better for women in computer science in the careers, with only 20% of computer scientists in 2019 being women. On the occasion of the International Women's Day, therefore, we must disabuse the idea that a woman's place is in the home and give women and girls equal access to education and equal chance to succeed. I am reminded of the words by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who said, and I quote him, "We must overcome the idea that a woman's place is in the home. Even women who have jobs are often expected to do housework and child care, making it difficult for them to find employment and earn a decent wage, or be promoted, or start a business, end of quote. The Pan-African Parliament, like any other parliament, has an obligation to protect, promote, and uphold gender equality. The protocol to the Constitutive Act of the African Economic Community relating to the Pan-African Parliament, what we call the SET protocol, enjoins the Pan-African Parliament to, and I quote, enhance the full participation of African peoples in the economic development and integration of the continent. And I want to say the previous speaker, His Excellency Zapaeke, mentioned this. He actually implored upon Pan-African Parliament that as a parliament, we are better placed to advance the causes of women's rights. So this mandate to Pan-African Parliament is in itself inherently inclusive and obliges the PAP to ensure that regardless of gender, all African people are fully involved through their elected representatives in decision-making processes on issues that affect them on this continent. The Pan-African Parliament stands as much for the voice of men and boys as it does for the voice of women and girls, and should thus actively promote gender equality in all spheres, including the digital world. Parliamentarians must therefore advocate for internet access as a basic right. And I want to repeat this one, that the parliamentarians must advocate for internet access as a basic right. And the integration of ICT into education curriculum and the zero tolerance towards discrimination against girl child in pursuing education programs in the field of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And this will go a long way towards bridging the gap between men and women in the control access of the key levers of the economy. The Pan-African Parliament places high importance or premium on gender equality and women empowerment. As such, in addition to committees of gender, family, youth, and the people with disabilities, the Pan-African Parliament leveraged on Rule 85 of the Rules of Procedure to establish a women's caucus to play a complementary oversight role to the women's rights and gender issues. In cognizant that caucuses are an extension of the work of committees, the mandate of the Women's Caucus is intricately interwoven with that of the Gender Committee. This calls for seamless teamwork and collaboration between the committees. It is in this spirit that the selected representatives of the Women's Caucus attending the United Nations Conference on Status of Women in New York is represented by people from all the other relevant committees. As I alluded to in the first part where I made a quotation, this day is a sobering reminder. This day is a sobering reminder to all of us that women's struggle is everyone's struggle. In fact, gender issues should permeate the programs of every committee at the Pan-African Parliament without even duplication. For example, the committee sittings are being held under the African Union theme for 2023, the year of the FCTA, acceleration of FCTA implementation. The Committee on Trade, Customs and Immigration has a pivotal role in ensuring that member states ratify the African Free Trade Area as a way of eventually empowering women also as we expand our economies. So there should be a gender response to all our programs as committees and ensure that we are gender sensitive in everything that we are planning for. Similarly, the rural economy, the Committee on Rural Economy, Agriculture, Natural Resources and Empowerment, the environment, so should also ensure that in most African, address this issue, in most African economies, women account for 90% of unpaid domestic labor. Women account for 90% of unpaid domestic labor, which is less valued in the present-day capitalist society. Thus, in most African states, the burden of subsistence farming in the rural areas is borne by women. Yet, they do not own the land on which they strive and thrive. The committees must play a defining role in pushing for the empowerment of women to own the means of production and participate on equal footing with their male counterparts in enhancing food self-sufficiency on the continent. We actually have a big threat at the moment of food insufficiency because of lack of inputs arising from the Russia-Ukraine war. And 6 months, 10 months down the line, the effects will be felt. The Committee on International Relations, Conflict Resolution, we expect them also to make sure that in all the conflict areas, issues of women are assessed, scrutinized, and ensure that women are not, as is always the case, the major victims from wars which have been caused by other people. And in terms of war, women are invariably the victims of the upsurge in sexual and physical violence, while women also often bear the sole responsibility and risk of getting their families and themselves out of the violent environment. According to the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, more than half of the planet's 80 million displaced people are women and children. I will repeat that one. According to the UNHCR, and more than half of the planet or the global 80 million displaced people are women and children. Given this background, therefore, it is inevitable that the Committee on Cooperation should consider women's plight in looking at issues of conflict on the continent. And as we speak today, in Mauritius, there is a serious issue in Mauritius as we speak. Not Mauritius, sorry, Tunisia. Tunisia. And in fact, I can't hide it. When I was coming into the chamber with the Dean of Ambassadors, he actually mentioned that to me and say, Mr. President, there's a situation in Tunisia that requires urgent attention. Violence based on color of the skin pigment, and people are dying in Tunisia, on this continent now. And PAP should do something, because such a barbaric type of conflicts. It's barbaric in this day and age to fight and kill somebody because their skin is more black, more white, more red, more than the other. It becomes a source of conflict. Let me say that according to the Secretary General of the UN, the then Ban Ki-moon, the then Secretary General, he said achieving gender equality requires the engagement of women and men, boys and girls. It is everyone's responsibility. We as Pan-African Parliament have done a lot in issues of women. PAP continues to play its part to advocate for the ratification, domestication, and implementation of the African Union Protocol on Women's Rights. Additionally, since its inception, Pan-African Parliament has embarked on deliberate programs earmarked to protect women's rights and enhance gender equality and affirmative action for women across Africa. We have created space for an annual women's conference every October in this chamber. Every October. So all of you are already invited as I speak. October, all of you are already invited. October, there is going to be a women's conference so that we continue advancing issues of women, and that cognizant of the impact of the conflict on women and the children, the PAP has also undertaken fact-finding missions to assess the situation of women and girls in conflict areas, including Chad, 2006, Central African Republic, April 2007, Burkina Faso, 2008, Sahrawi Republic, July 2011, and Sudan and South Sudan, September 2012. In order to increase, you see, in 2012, nothing much after because of our budget. Our budget was cut, so we didn't have much money for missions. But in order to increase awareness and eradicate harmful traditional practices such as female genital mutilation, the PAP undertook a fact-finding missions to various member states, including Ethiopia in 2009. It also contributed to the launch of a pilot training program for the African midwives in Sudan in 2012, which was towards strengthening health systems and particularly in the provision of maternal health services in Africa. I'm aware that we are also in the process of finalizing the development of the model law on gender parity, which we hope will be used as a benchmark by member states in improving national legislation to ensure that it promotes, protects, and upholds gender equality. Even the Pan-African Parliament structures reflect the growing recognition and endeavor to uphold gender parity. As we see, out of the 5 bureau members, there used to be 1 woman, now we have 2. They will increase in the future to 3, maybe to 4, maybe to 5, who knows? It's coming one day. So out of the 12 committee chairpersons, the number is too low. We have 4 women. We are not yet there. But once we realize on such a day that we need to do something, I think the other opportunities in the future, the regional caucuses will try to push more women to positions of chairing. Otherwise, all that is propelled by our conviction and belief as PAP that women are capable and are worth anything. We shall, as Pan-African Parliament, we shall ensure that gender parity is a lived reality. We want to walk the talk as Pan-African Parliament. I thank you. Shukran jazilen. Merci beaucoup. Asante sana. Obrigado. Zigo Mwambiri. Thank you very much.
Honorable member,
honorable members.
Consulting with the President of the Pan-African Parliament and the President of the Women Caucus, we would like to maybe continue our proceeding if the chamber allows, so that we can catch up on the time a little bit. If you agree with the proposal, we'll just proceed and have the photo group at the end of the session completely. Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you. My role is finished now. I will just leave the chairperson of the Women Caucus now to take over and continue with the program. Thank you very much.
السادة والسيدات الحضور، الآن ننتقل إلى الفقرة الثانية وهي فقرة طاولة النقاش. نطلب من السادة الحضور ترك الأماكن للمحاضرين. Vous pouvez descendre, laisser les autres monter. You are finished. You okay? You can leave your stage. Yes, you are finished. Je demande à mes vice-présidentes.
I would like to ask the vice chairs to give place to the guests, please.
أدعو السيدة آن جيسكو المديرة الإقليمية.
Honorable Anne Gesco, the Regional Director, representative of the Program of the United Nations in charge of AIDS virus. Madam Anne Gesco, kindly, you have the floor. Then we have also Mr. Remy, who is representing the UNESCO, and also I invite Her Excellency Khadija Orhan, who is the Deputy Chair of Gender Committee of the African Union. So I invite them. She's in charge of women and people living with handicaps. I also invite Mrs. Lamali, Honorable Lamali, in charge of the Committee on Technical Sciences of the Pan-African Parliament. I invite them all to join us.
أريد أن أذكر الحفل الكريم.
I would like to recall that the celebration of the International Women's Day is including the participation of women and girls that are working for the promotion of their rights and also for the integration of women and girls in the decision-making process at all levels. This day enables us to highlight the need to protect the rights of women and girls at international level, and also to fight against violence which is exercised through the internet. Today, we are celebrating the International Women's Day. Indeed, it is a high-level celebration. We have among us a number of personalities headed and led by His Excellency, the President of the Pan-African Parliament, and this celebration has been an opportunity to gather the Pan-African parliamentarians and also the organs of the African Union, as well as the United Nations institutions and the civil society. They are gathered to discuss the role, the singular role and specific role played by the African woman in particular, and played by women in general. This role is played in all the sectors of activities. It is also an opportunity for us to insist on the necessity to enable them to get have access to the digital instruments, and also in order to fight gender disparity. I will not be long. Now I'm going to move and give the floor to the guests. And first, I will start with Madame Anne Gesco, who is the representative of the UNDP, the United Nations Program against AIDS. You have the floor, Madame Anne. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Honorable Amina Yaya, President of the Pan-African Parliament's Women's Caucus. I want to acknowledge the presence of the ambassadors, Ambassador Andre Zapayake and Ambassador of Egypt. I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, but just want to acknowledge your presence. Thank you so much. And my brother, Honorable President of the Pan-African Parliament, Senator Chief Fortune Charumbira. I really enjoyed the passion with which you discussed this issue, and I see that you have not changed over the years. So congratulations and thank you so much. And I recognize all the honorable members of Parliament representing our beloved continent. President, I also want to acknowledge my MPs who are here, who represent me in my country, Kenya, who are also here, and I want to acknowledge them. There's one MP, actually, who's my MP from my village. There's an honorable MP. So I have to be very careful that as I say what I say, I hope that it reflects that that's already happening in the village, because we have to be ahead of the curve. But in any case, I stand here representing the United Nations. I am here on behalf of the United Nations Joint Program on HIV and AIDS. And I know many times I appear places and people ask me, is there still AIDS? And so as Africans, I think it's so important that we take on the fact that we have the opportunity, the unparalleled opportunity, to put one of our health challenges that has dogged us for decades. It's been 40 years since AIDS began. And we have the opportunity to put this behind us. If we will just push through to the end, by 2030, we should have this behind us. We should not be thinking about this as we push for the 2063 Africa's agenda. So the Africa we want is an Africa free of AIDS, an Africa where everybody lives a healthy life in their future. This year's International Women's Day celebration on digital innovation and technology for gender equality is a big opportunity for us to strengthen our efforts and to leverage this technology to be able to fast-track us as we seek to achieve these SDGs. Sima Bahas, who is the Undersecretary General, Executive Director of UN Women, right now holding this Commission on the Status of Women, calls this digital poverty, where it is disproportionately understood. I think all of you have said this, how the low levels of literacy and difficult conditions where women live, and they do so when we have the tools in our hands. We know that women across the world contribute to only 13%, and nearly 45% fewer women than men have access to the internet in sub-Saharan Africa. And yet we know how, if we put the tools in their hands, and we know countries from Kenya, and in Kenya women have access to mobile technology and mobile banking. I think we're the highest banked women in society in our region. So we know it's possible for women to have access to this. We know it's possible for children to have access to technology, to access education. So what ends up happening with this digital divide is that we have an alarmingly high number of women and girls who are left out of the digital opportunities that they could have. From a health perspective and from the work that we do, excluding women and girls from digital participation restricts their access to life-saving information. You remember we all knew ABC, those of you who are old enough like me to remember the ABC messaging. We no longer see this around. And that has dire consequences in a region where we know how to prevent HIV, we know how to prevent sexually transmitted diseases and other health conditions, and yet we don't because of lack of information. The result of this is that girls and women are disproportionately affected by HIV. Today, 63% of everybody who lives with HIV in this entire region is a woman. 63%. 4,900 girls are infected every week in Africa. Every single week. And I know we thought that we had forgotten. We thought we were done because we have ARVs. But you still get sick before you take the ARVs. So as long as we are keeping that tap open, 4,900 girls every single week. It is about 3 times more girls' infections than boys. Many times we're told we forget about the boys. And maybe we do, but even as we do, the girls are so disproportionately affected than boys, that we have to pay special attention to the girls. In some of our countries, it's 4 times. In others, it is 5 times. In a country yesterday, we were talking 7 times girls infected more than boys. So they're not being infected by their age mates. We know this story from a long time ago. It is older men, and I won't look up now lest I see any older men in the room, but it's no older man. It is older men and not younger women, boys of the same age, who are infecting these girls. The factors that fuel this are those deep-seated issues that you raised, Your Excellency, up here. In Kenya, we call this the triple threat because not only is HIV infection an issue, but so is teenage pregnancy, so is gender-based violence. These are happening all at the same time. So is child marriage. In some regions, it's FGM. So these are pervasive conditions that girls have to deal with. Our report last year on HIV, we named it Dangerous Inequalities, and it highlighted these dangerous inequalities because these are the inequalities that make it near impossible for us to end AIDS and end all these different, achieve our SDGs and achieve the goals that we need to do so. And the social cultural norms that continue to dog us and make it difficult can be dealt with by the law. And many of you are here, empowered to do this. And I just want to go through a couple of the laws that I think are important. And it's a story which, for me, as a young woman in Kenya, it's interesting. I sort of had the unspoken permission to have sex at about 17. I didn't say I had sex at 17, so don't misinterpret me, but I'm just saying I had the unspoken permission to have sex at 17. But I didn't have the right to contraception at 17 because I was underage. This is the story of our girls. The law prevents our girls, there is no age of consent, from accessing life-saving drugs, testing, access to contraception. You know, they can't access them because the law doesn't allow them. But we all know quietly in our homes, we talk about it, that girls 14, 15, 16, 17 are having sex, but without the tools to prevent them from being 4,900 infected all the time. So here we have these contradictory laws. The age of marriage. In many of our countries, and I think the statistics I have here, is that just here in East and Southern Africa, it's worse if I go across the whole of Africa, 36% of girls are married before the ages of 18, 15% under the ages of 15, or rather 10% under the ages of 15. I recently visited Mozambique, and we found streams and streams of girls of 12 and 13 and 14 and 15 standing in queues going through a normal antenatal care clinic as if this was normal. So we have normalized what is completely abnormal, yet we have the tools. We know what to do. We have laws about access to education. And yet we have over 50% of girls in many of our countries that don't access education, and it is the law for every child to go to school. And we know that if every girl goes to school and stays until the end of secondary school, she reduces the chances of infection to HIV by 50%. But yet we still leave the girls out of school so that they can do those multiple tasks that our president here was sharing with us. But over and above that now, we have pregnancies. I know you all know the statistics. During COVID, 300,000 girls pregnant, 350 I think in Uganda, 250 in other countries. Each one of our countries was guilty of this. Our girls got pregnant, they got pregnant in the safety of their homes, and many of them could not go back to school. So we have lost time, lost lots of time. But the good news is that many of our countries are now legislating to allow these girls to go back to school after pregnancy. Now, before this was seen as absolutely criminal. You cannot do that. If you're doing this, you're encouraging other girls to get pregnant. The truth of it is that by doing this, the girls themselves succeed exceptionally when they go back to school and they realize the pain of the decision, the situation they find themselves in. The lack of this law also assumes that it is the bad behavior of the girl that causes her to be pregnant. When a girl is impregnated at 12, 13, 14, is it her who has caused the pregnancy herself because of poor behavior, when she's impregnated by somebody who is 20, 15, 30 years older than her? Who has actually caused the pregnancy? Whose responsibility is it? So why punish the girl and not punish the impregnator? And so the laws are changing. In Sierra Leone, they call it radical inclusion to return these girls back to school. So you're sitting here, members of parliament, your excellencies from across the world, with the power to change the lives of children, of girls and young women in this continent of ours. Imagine if these girls, on top of this, have the ability to access technology, where they can go to school as they look after their babies, where they are able to continue to extend the school as best as they can. These are opportunities that we see and that we seek, and for which this year's theme really celebrates. Technology and digital spaces should be made more inclusive and more accessible with virtual medication consultation. We know telehealth is very useful. Because there is so much stigma when girls go to clinics, we should be able to get as much information in their hands on applications. And actually, SADC, in partnership with us, came up with an app that we call In Her Hands, which provides sexual and reproductive health information and direction for services that can be made available across our countries if you're interested and if you are keen for this, to increase HIV prevention. The virtual world gives us a space to create boundaries and interact safely in our schools, in our homes, and online. But we also know that violence and sexual harassment, we know that stalking and Zoom bombing and sex trollings are examples of attacks on women online. And these are areas that we can work hard, both in terms of the law, but in terms of training and equipping everybody for precautionary and other measures to ensure that digital safety becomes a norm. And so, at the UNAIDS, in partnership with others, including UNESCO, UNICEF, UNFPA, ourselves, UN Women, we have come up with an initiative that we call Education Plus. We launched the Education Plus initiative at the African Union last July, led by the President of Zambia, the Presidents of Chad and Senegal, and with the AU Commissioner himself, with the Organization of African First Ladies. And the Education Plus initiative seeks to accelerate investments to prevent HIV, violence, teenage pregnancy, by ensuring that these adolescent girls and young women have equal opportunities to access quality secondary education alongside key education and health services, and ultimately to support their economic autonomy and empowerment, that we can then imagine for them a life that is independent, that is strong, that enables them to go back and take care of themselves and their families and the society and contribute in as great a way as possible. The Secretary General has launched the Transform Education Summit. As part of this, we are engaged with his work, and it harnesses connectivity and really looks at how digital teaching and learning resources can contribute to the transformation and democratization of education. As we work to end AIDS, we are also looking at innovation and technology in terms of actual drugs. There is available in the West, across the West, if you have HIV, you can take an injection, and for three months you don't care and worry about treatment. That's not the same here. Even though Zimbabwe and South Africa have passed the law to enable you to have long-acting PrEP, these are innovations in science and technology that we are working hard on and should push across our continent, so that women and girls have broader choices. The vaginal ring, there's all kinds of new tools that are on the table that we can expand along with technology, digital technology as we know it, to ensure that all have access and that we can broaden and prevent those infections which are unnecessary. So as I conclude, I just want to say this, and I quote Edward Burke: "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Let me end with this study that we did. It's a study that we call the cost of inaction. This cost of inaction, we're still working on it across multiple countries, but as we did this study was done in South Africa, it was done in Zimbabwe, Mr. President, Your Excellency, and it showed that if you take the cost of violence against women, the cost of teenage pregnancy to the health system, etc., the lost time, and the cost of HIV in a teenage girl, and you compare that with the cost of staying and keeping that girl in school, it costs you more than double the cost of educating a girl than it costs for you to deal with the consequences of teenage pregnancy, GBV, and HIV infection in this same girl. But all in all, it costs the economy of Zimbabwe 10% of its GDP to deal with these issues. It costs South Africa 10% of their GDP. It costs Zimbabwe 20% of your GDP if you do nothing and take no action against violence, against teenage pregnancy, against child marriage, against new infections in these young women and girls who are supposed to be the future that we are imagining would be the ones who take us to the future, who lead us here in the parliament, who lead our countries, who educate in schools, who do all the health providers. We are losing huge amounts because of not investing in these girls. And so for that, I thank you. The end of AIDS is here. Thank you.
شكرا للأستاذ.
Thank you.
Thank you.
متحدة للتربية والعلوم
Now we move to the UNESCO.
We have Remy Shawad from UNESCO,
In the field of education.
who is going to talk to us about education, and she is in charge of education in UNESCO.
بين الجنسين للتربية والعلوم والثقافة الأستاذ ريمي شو.
Floor to Remy Shawa.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, Your Excellency, the President.
Which is depleted, so I'll use English. My daily French has gone. It is a pleasure to be here this afternoon, colleagues. My name is Remy Shaw from UNESCO in the regional office. The theme of this year's celebration, Digital Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality, highlights the need to embrace technology and innovation to bridge the gender-digital divide and create opportunities for women and girls in our African continent. We have witnessed in many ways how technology can be leveraged to create a more inclusive and equitable world where every woman and girl thrives and can reach their full potential. We draw inspiration from many innovations and the solutions and initiatives that are being developed and implemented by women and girls and gender equality advocates across the continent. From mobile apps that provide access to essential health information in Uganda, to the use of drones to deliver health products in Rwanda and Botswana, to platforms that connect women entrepreneurs with funders and mentors, to campaigns that challenge harmful gender norms and stereotypes. We're seeing a wave of creativity and energy that is driving us forward towards a more just and inclusive society. We know that digital technology can be used to analyze data and identify patterns of discrimination, which can then help policymakers to design targeted interventions to address gender inequality. For example, artificial intelligence-powered tools can be used to identify pay gaps between men and women in the workplace, which can then help to promote equal pay for equal work. However, the use of digital technology also has the potential to increase the digital divide between men and women. This is because the development of most digital technologies is largely dominated by men, resulting in a lack of diversity and in gender bias in the design and implementation of these technologies. This can lead to the development of tools that reinforce existing gender stereotypes and harmful gender norms, and also perpetuate discrimination and gender inequality. So, what can we do together, and what should we be doing as Africa? We need to work together to develop laws and policies that promote openness and the innovative use of digital technologies to reduce the digital divide and foster an inclusive digital transformation that respects and protects human rights and gender equality. We need to monitor and address the potential risks of new technologies such as artificial intelligence by developing human rights-based international ethical standards and actionable frameworks, building capacities of their implementation and preventing discrimination, including the proliferation of gender biases through technology. We need to conduct national assessments of internet development and its adherence to the principles of human rights, openness, accessibility, and multi-stakeholder participation through the application of tools that we have at our disposal, such as the UNESCO's Internet Universality Indicators Framework. We need to advance the development of digital skills and competencies through the education sector to ensure that our education system is prepared for the fourth industrial revolution, placing women and girls at the center of our efforts. In a sense, we should revolutionize education. I think the days of learning about Vasco da Gama and how he trekked from Portugal to India are gone. We need to prepare our learners and give them the tools, the values, the resources, and the skills to be able to create jobs or find jobs, and also to make healthy choices about their well-being. For instance, how they can prevent HIV, early and unintended pregnancies, gender-based violence, etc. We need to build the capacity of the development of inclusive and human-centered AI in Africa through promoting open data, as well as strengthened networks and customized tools. Africans have the right to enjoy the benefits of scientific progress, as we know in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And finally, we need to accelerate action to transform teacher education using digital technologies and expand the use of, for instance, the UNESCO ICT competence framework for teachers to strengthen learning in the digital age and help build the digital and knowledge divides. We need to pay a particular attention to female teachers or teachers who are women, and together with them, identify the barriers and opportunities that exist for strengthening teacher competency in digital technology. As much as we all know, teachers cannot give what teachers do not have. And as UNESCO, Madam President, we're really keen, together with our UN partners, to support member states to be able to take these actions forward. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا السيد ريميشو.
Thank you, Mr. Remishu, the representative of UNESCO. And now we will move to the Pan-African Parliament, and I will start by the Commission on Gender, Family, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities. And now I will give the floor to Honorable Khadija Arohan, the Vice Chairperson of the committee. Thank you. The floor is yours. Thank you, Madam Chair. Honorable Chief Fortune Charombera, President of the Pan-African Parliament, honorable members of the PAP Bureau, representatives of the African Corps, Diplomatic Corps, Mr. Ambassador of Arab Republic of Egypt, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the UNESCO and UN organizations, honorable parliamentarians and representatives of media. At the outset, I would like to extend my thanks to His Excellency Honorable the President of PAP for his interest and keenness on celebrating the International Women's Day and discussing women issues in Africa. I would like also to seize this opportunity to say Happy International Women's Day, and under the theme of for all inclusive digital world innovation and technologies for gender equality. And my speech on behalf of the Committee on Gender, Family, Youth and Persons with Disabilities will be as follows. Digital technologies amongst the tools that we can use in order to achieve gender equality and to empower women and young women to new opportunities. And regardless of this, we still have a digital gap and divide between males and females because of the gender-based traditions and customs in which women are looked at being in a lower level than males. Women in developing countries are still suffering from challenges in order to use the digital technologies. For example, the girls' education in Africa are much less than males' counterparts. And women represent 29% of workforce in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and less job opportunities in the science and technology-related fields. A small number of African member states are trying to fight the gender inequality, because with this fast-paced developments, some countries are lagging behind. This is a fact and reality which necessitates for us as parliamentarians to put stronger rules and laws in order to end any kind of gender inequality and to work hard in order to change the stereotypes against females and women. Digital technologies are amongst the tools to abuse women and girls in the internet, as the case of the influencers and those who are defending human rights in particular. So we are in a need for safe digital space that inclusive and cannot differentiate between males and females and never harm the women's rights. We also need digital tools in order to enable women to contribute in this digital space and to enable women and girls to access internet and to be empowered for safer future. In our celebration of International Women's Day, it is of paramount importance to make sure that the digital technology will accelerate in order to achieve the SDGs and to achieve digital equality between males and females. As Africans, we should work hard in order to achieve this and put an end of any efforts against women all over the globe. And the male-dominated communities should change the stereotype and to end this the idea that women should stay in home and take care of her family. We should struggle together to fight against any kind of digital discrimination and to gap the digital divide and to enable her to contribute in the fast-paced technological transformation. In line with the theme of this year, we shouldn't forget that African women in many countries is still suffering from poverty, fragility, displacement, racism, and she's still a victim of many traditions and all sorts of violence. We should fight together and struggle together in order to put an end of those sufferings and to liberate her of all forms of injustice. Long live African women. Thank you.
شكرا الأستاذة خديجة.
Thank you, Honorable Khadija Arohal, the Vice Chairperson of Commission on Gender, Family, Youth and Persons with Disabilities of PAP. I would like to recall that the theme of today's International Women's Day for an inclusive digital world, innovation and technologies for gender equality. This theme is in line with our committee in PAP, which is the Committee of Transport, Industry, Communications, Energy, Science and Technology. And now I will move to Honorable Bahja Lamali to deliver her speech. Honorable Bahja is the chairperson of the PAP Committee on Transport, Industry, Communications. Honorable Bahja, the floor is yours. Thank you, Honorable Amina. Honorable Senior Chief Fortune Charumbera, President of the Pan-African Parliament. Honorable Amina Tijani Yaya, President of the PAP Women's Caucus. Members of the Bureau, honorable members of Bureau, ladies and gentlemen, Secretary General of UN, at the outset, I would like to express my appreciation to all women in PAP and each woman, wherever she is. Ladies, here is the time to celebrate your day on the 8th of March every year, to remind the whole world of the half of the population that without whom there is no life. There is no life without women. There is no world without women or females. Honorable President, we really feel bad when we remember the reality in which women is living as places of conflicts and armed conflicts and violence. Women are the victims of such wars and conflicts. Lots of them were detained and killed and displaced and trying to take refuge. Every day we can witness the suffering of the African woman who is the victim of armed conflicts and poverty witnessed by some African countries, and the displacement in huge numbers is clear evidence of these sufferings. In this occasion, Honorable President, allow me to remember the achievements by women in the past and in the future, in the present. History can prove how Algerian women fought the occupation and how she struggled hand in hand with men. She is the strong, patient, history-building woman. This day is an occasion to emphasize the pioneering and leading role of women in our communities. Women are occupying the highest posts and positions, and to prove her strength, woman is calling for her rights, the right in life, right to work, the right to practice political life, rights to use artificial intelligence and digital technologies, which is closely related to the theme of today's celebration. So women should contribute in all technological and digital fields, and women should be protected against any kind of digital-based violations. So we call upon all international community to put instruments, and we should work hard in order to improve access to digital tools and instruments in Africa, because we are in this digital age. In Africa, we still have the digital divide between males and females, and enabling the females, women and young girls will help the community, since it will create job opportunities and open new markets to access to health services, financial services, education, and can contribute in public life. Development cannot be achieved without trying to reduce the digital gap. Some may think that this gap has no solution, but the economists think that capitals should be used, and technology-related experts should work hard in order to provide affordable solutions. Sociologists thought that the digital divide is a kind of gender inequality. That's to say, the inequality in distributing the digital wealth. And they think that the economic and social cultural conditions should be provided to females. The real problem is economic one, because there is no equal distribution of wealth. It also has a social face, because there is poverty, displacement suffered by women in Africa. So, as parliamentarians representing the Egyptian peoples, we have a role to contribute in the efforts in order to bridge that digital gap and to take into consideration the gender-related issues in technology, innovation, and to have laws to protect the women's rights and to include them in the policies and strategies and plans to empower women. There should be legislations and necessary legal frameworks in order to deal with cyber crimes against women, because African women is still facing challenges to build and to develop the African continent. We should work in our fields in order to develop Africa by allowing women to access to technology. This is a real struggle to develop our technology. Happy International Women's Day. Thank you.
شكرا للأستاذة بهجت. والآن سوف ننتقل إلى الفقرة.
Thank you very much. We're now going to the second phase of this discussion, and it comprises opening the floor to distinguished participants to make their comments or address their questions to the panelists.
تفضلوا. تفضل.
Annoncez-nous.
Oui.
Have the floor, sir.
Mais apparemment, il n'y a personne ici. Je vais essayer de faire.
Simply wished to add one element. I am the chairperson of the Northern Caucasus parliamentarians. For a long time, we've been talking about women being at the forefront of African unity. The first political group that was created in 1962 by women, the Organization of African Unity came on board later on. So women have been at the forefront to combat for African Union. The Pan-African Youth Movement was created before the OAU. The social and political movements preceded institutional movements. That's my first point. Secondly, I think women should be given significant responsibilities. Why? Because they have a sense of responsibility. Men have a sense of power, on the other hand. I believe that from here and in the future, we need to give women more importance. It will go beyond this parliament, beyond institutions, so that women play a key role in Africa's development. Thank you, Honorable Member of Parliament. I know this is just additional information and not a question. I'd like to give the floor to Honorable Victoria Kingston. She is the second Vice President of the Women's Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament. You have the floor.
Honorable Chairperson, allow me to thank all the presenters this afternoon. Mine is, I want to comment or say, I'm worried a lot because we are trying to improve in digitalization. By looking at the persistent blackouts, what can we do? Because we cannot do any digital go online if our gadgets doesn't have power, and we don't have any way to charge our gadgets because of the blackout. Perhaps this time, modern country or Africa, we go for solar gadgets because these blackouts are letting us down. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Merci. Thank you very much, Honorable Victoria. It is a complement of information. So, is there anyone who would like to take the floor in the hall? Honorable, over to you. Honorable Mama Salu from Chad. Nadif. Good afternoon. We have to struggle and fight together for the benefit of our wives, children, and mothers, girls and mothers. Today, the 8th of March 2023, is a great day. We are celebrating two things. First, we are celebrating the remarkable progress made by African women in particular, and by women as a whole, in reaching a digital world, and also in order to innovate in terms of technology for a better world. We have to take advantage of the new ITCs. Second, we should also tackle the education of rural areas. How can we transfer this technology to rural and remote areas? We have to also get the support of man in support of women. Also, I always believe that women should present itself as a strong person and not based herself only on quota. Finally, I would like to say that I married with a girl who was preparing a PhD. And this woman I married has insisted on the role of women in terms of culture and social issues. So she presented her thesis, and she insisted that men should support women in order to promote women. I would like also to tackle the issue of crimes, especially those which are based on the internet, cybercrime. We need strong regulations and laws, and here the Pan-African Parliament can play an important role to support the also the national parliaments. The role of women should be strengthened. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Honorable Professor Nadif, Yusuf Nadif. I would like now to give the floor to Honorable Amy Majudina. She is chairing the caucus of Southern Africa. Over to you, Majudina.
President of the Women's Caucus, pardon me, I will speak sitting down. I'm very tall for these microphones. To the President of the Pan-African Parliament, the Vice Presidents, all the bureaucracies present here, honorable members, our guests who have spoken so well in articulating the International Women's Day. Allow me to say, appreciating all your inputs, where can you put us in terms of achievements as a continent? What percentage can you give us? This day calls on us to imagine a gender equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. Celebrate women's achievement. With your inputs, what is that we can celebrate today as women in this beautiful continent of Africa? Can you imagine a gender equal Africa? Africa free of bias, Africa that is equitable, and Africa that is inclusive. Africa where differences, diversities is valued. Together we can forge women's equality. We can truly celebrate and reward women's achievement, provided we are putting all this, what we are saying, into practice, into implementation. Therefore, today I want to make a call to the Pan-African Parliament that we launch a campaign of ensuring that the International Women's Day is celebrated through positive spin-offs and positive development of women in removing all the stereotypes that put women at the back. And next year, 2024, on the 8th of March, in this August House, this chamber, we must come and say what is the progress that has been made in terms of attending to all issues that are affecting women, the issues that make women not to be able to move forward in terms of technology, in terms of economic empowerment. I thank you.
Merci, Honorable.
Thank you, Honorable Majudina. This is a contribution from our part. Now I'll give the floor to Professor Matudu. He's from South Africa. I'm sorry for, maybe I did not spell your name very well.
PAP Women's Caucus, an Honorable Chief Fortune Charimbira, President of PAP, and distinguished members of this Parliament, in particular female members and the women of this great continent. It must sadden us, all of us, to learn first that there are people, especially women, who have no access to land and natural resources and means of production. Secondly, that there is racial violence and homicide in Tunisia and other parts of the continent. It is even more saddening that these are the legacies of imperialism and colonialism which continue, which led to the decolonization of the African continent, with the exception of the Sahrawi Republic. Honorable President Amina Yahya, we cannot ignore the fact that the landlessness, patriarchy, and racial violence are the legacy of imperialism and colonialism, as well as some cultures and religions. European imperialist powers violently dispossessed African people, especially women, of the land and its natural resources. The failure and or neglect of post-colonial African states to restitute or return the land and its natural resources left these resources in the hands of colonial settlers, and therefore entrenched the legacy of the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities, which affect in particular women and children. As Africans, we pay lip service to patriarchy and fail to address its root cause, namely the false notion that the supreme beings are a father and his son, and that there is no female supreme being. In indigenous African spiritual thought, the supreme beings are a queen of heaven, Muari or Muari Wedenga, and the virgin mother of the sun god Ra. This queen of heaven, Muari or Muari Wedenga, is also defined as the most high, Muzimu or Mudimu, and the queen of the underworld, Sabanyadaja, popularly known as Queen Saba or Sheba. As I conclude, the chairperson, the belief in and worship of the Queen Saba or Sheba is called Sabaism. The belief in and worship of the son of God, Kara, which manifested itself as the sun god Ra, is called Karaism, the African spiritual philosophy or religion of light. What I'm trying to say, Honorable Chairperson, is that indigenous African people had a religion before colonialism, and this religion placed the woman at the top of the man. But today our children are taught that God is a man and is ruling the world with his son, and there are no women in heaven. And how do you expect our children to respect their mothers, to respect women, when this type of false teachings are continuing? I am therefore, in conclusion, saying that let's heed the advice of Honorable President Mandela, who said that we must recognize the triple heritage of Africa: Judaism, Islam, and African religion, and that African religion is no longer a superstition that must be replaced by other religion. He emphasized the central tenet of African religion, which is Ubuntu Butu, or Utu in Swahili. I thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Honorable. Thank you very much, Honorable. It is a wonderful intervention because you have tackled and addressed an issue which is of concern of many African women, the access to land. Many African countries have made pledges, and they have set up and developed strategies, sensitization campaign for the access to land by women. Thank you very much, Honorable. You have really addressed an issue which is of concern for me in my own country. Thank you very much. I'll give the floor now to Honorable Samake from Zambia. Samake from Zambia. Over to you, Honorable.
Thank you very much. Just have very few words to add. I want to say that I have no apology to make in supporting our women. I am grounded on this point because I am here courtesy of my grandmother. Take note that I will support the women even as we debate in the Parliament of Zambia. I have done that before, and I will continue doing that. My observation, though, is that women, you don't support each other. That is the weakness that you have. In fact, you are enemies of your own. Don't blame men. Don't blame men anymore. Blame yourselves because you don't support each other. We have had several women standing as presidential candidates in Zambia. The women do not support them. So you must change the narrative so that you support yourselves and we can join in to support the women as they advance in the development of Africa. Thank you very much.
Merci. Thank you, Honorable Samake. Now the floor is to Honorable Miriam Shadria from Zambia.
Let me also observe the protocols that were observed earlier. And I also took note of our President's invitation to the Women's Conference next October. In welcoming that invitation, what came to mind also is whether we actually have a concrete plan of action in terms of what we want to do, what we want to achieve as our respective countries, but also from the perspective of PAP, so that when we meet again, in that conference, and indeed when we meet again next year during the Women's Day, we would have had, measurable indicators that will have pointed to the progress that we need to be making. I say this because, Madam Chair, in the last plenary, we discussed the implementation of the protocol on the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights, the rights of women in Africa, which is commonly known as the Maputo Protocol. And one of the resolutions that arose, from that discussion was that we should initiate training programs for women and girls in the use of digital tools, and to allocate resources to encompass access to technology and social media by women and girls. So, what progress are we making towards, such a resolution? And when we meet, even in meetings like this, really we need to be evaluating our progress so that we do not fall in the trap of listening to good speeches as has been given, this morning, but without any reference to specific steps and milestones that would have achieved in this agenda of trying to bridge the gap between men and women, not only in the digital sector, but also in education, in agriculture, and in all the other sectors where, as women, we are crying for equity and equality in the broad sense. So, Madam Chair, indeed, today's commemoration has given us an opportunity to reflect on the opportunities, that are there for women, and indeed the gaps that continue to exist. But my call, as I have alluded to earlier, is the actions, the action plans that we need to put in place and hold ourselves accountable with, to ensure that this song about gender inequality is not sung year in, year out. I thank you, Madam, and I submit.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Honorable. I'll give the floor now to Honorable Amina Ali Idris, the Vice Chair of the Committee on Transportation Industry and New Technologies of the Pan-African Parliament. Over to you, Madam Amina.
And say thank to our President to organize this day. And I say thanks, allow me to thank for the presenter for the clear presentation and give us some information and help us to improve. Today, the commemoration of International Women's Days. The topic is for an inclusive digital world, innovation and technology for gender equality. This is very good topic, but the problem about the gender equality in this topic is we women don't like the scientific field. That's why we cannot reach this gender equality. Because when we see in the background, all women hate at school, hate mathematics and scientific. As we are parliamentarian and we represent the African population, what is our strategy for the specialists for the girls at school that we can make to help lady like this domain? We cannot stay like here and reach this level, because the girl at school don't like, especially naturally doesn't like the mathematics. I know that I'm an engineer. I pass every time in my country. There is an engineer woman, but when you see my background, I almost alone or two. I don't know why this. We can put as our achievement in Pan-African Parliament to help the girls at the school to don't hate the mathematical and physical physical field. That's why my question. Thank you so much.
Merci, Madame Amina.
Thank you, Madam Amina. Now, I will give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Tayyib Mohammed Abdelatif, Ambassador of the Republic of Egypt in South Africa. Or rather, Ambassador of Sudan. Thank you very much, Chair. Egypt and Sudan are neighbors. Welcome, says the chairperson. I would like to greet the ambassador of Egypt. Thank you, Chair, says the ambassador of Sudan. We are celebrating today the African women in Africa and also the women in general. As you said rightly, women are everywhere at every time. And without a woman, there is no word at all. Women is present in everybody's life, as a wife, a daughter, and mother. The Sudanese woman is a leader, a pioneer. We find her in the constitutional court and everywhere. And I'm urging the Pan-African Parliament to assist us to promote the role of women and to get back the Sudanese women in this August Assembly. Thank you very much, says the Chair. Now I will give the floor to Senator Danchon from Kenya.
Excellency, Chair of this session, I just wanted to go straight to the point And I'm picking it up from the issue of early marriages. I think one of the speakers did make the point that one of the things that is bringing, one of the issues that is bringing the African woman behind in technology includes early marriages. Now, the question I wanted to pose probably to the gender committee and also the caucus for women is to think about the question of what do we do when there is a conflict between religious values and the law. In many countries that have professed Islam, and in my country we have a very significant population of the Islam practicing Kenyans. You have a question of within our cultural practice, when you have the first moon, the lady is ready for marriage. And yet, the law in our country says you must reach the age of consent 18 years. So we have a conflict. My background is law, and we have never been able to resolve that issue. What do you do to a client who comes and tell you, I didn't do anything wrong by getting my daughter married off, and yet they are arresting me as the father, they are arresting her husband whom we have given and they have gone through the traditions properly, telling me the girl is not 18, but to me she is ready, and the law in my religion says is ready. So the challenge I'm posing to the women caucus and probably the gender committee of Pan-African Parliament, can we have a thinking around this place so that we can guide various African countries faced with this problem? Because early marriages sometimes is basically coming because religious values allow it. And Madam Speaker, I rest my case. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. We apologize, but we have received many requests for the floor, but given the time, the late time, and the short time, we cannot give the floor to everyone. So I will take a last intervention from Ambassador Birgit Monipe.
Is Ambassador Bridget Motsepe. I'm the Pan-African Parliament Ambassador for Economic Development and Entrepreneurship. I just wanted to share a little bit of information about the road we traveled in South Africa. In 1994, when we became liberated, we had a lot of laws that we inherited from the old apartheid regime that prohibited women in many aspects from being active. And whether even in the mining industry, where I have been very active in, there was even a law that says women are not allowed to be producing minerals. And in 1986, before the new South Africa, I actually became the first black person in South Africa to build mines. But the reason why I'm talking here is because we've been very instrumental in implementing legislation in Parliament that gave the obligation to each ministry to empower women and disabled people and members of disadvantaged communities. And you find that especially in the mining industry, we even had a law that says not more than 10%, not less than 10% women participation should be in the production activities of the mining industry from 2014. And then what we did in all the departments of government, each government department had to adhere to employment equity and human resource development rules and regulations. So if you are a producer or you're an investor, the government will say, I'll give you a license to trade, But the only time I'll give you a license to trade is if you're charter compliant. And the charter legislation, the compliancy, puts every investor under the obligation to be compliant and to obey the rules. And then your license will continue to prevail. And if you do not do that, then there's legislation in our government departments, whether it's health, Department of Health, Department of Mining, Department of Agriculture, Trade and Industry, Finance. Each government department has a legislative requirement to adhere to. So every investor, whether you're a foreign investor or a local investor, have to comply, and then your license will prevail to continue. If not, then you can be blacklisted or something like that. So what I'm appealing in our parliaments of Africa is that we have to re-look at the legislation that we have from where we come from. And also maybe from the African Union Parliament, Pan-African Parliament point of view, what we need to do is we have every year, we come here since Parliament has been created, and we have a talk shop. But when are we creating those committees that will then go and implement terms of references and action programs with deliverables and deadlines on what should be proposed to our countries when we go back to our parliaments? And then maybe create committees and chair people of those committees that will make sure that this meeting that we have on an annual basis, where we celebrate women achievements, can then come and deliver a performance appraisal in terms of what the achievements are that has addressed all the issues that have been spoken about this morning. Each and every presenter spoke meaningfully. But then we go home, and beyond that, what happens in the parliaments that we represent. So all I'm saying is that I'm very happy. Thank you for being here. And I came here as an ambassador, not as a member of parliament. But please, as any parliamentarian would like me to assist in your countries in terms of women development, economic development, entrepreneurship, inter-Africa trade, I am your ambassador of the Pan-African Parliament, and I'll be helpful. I'll be very honored to help as and when I'm needed. Thank you very much.
Merci, Madame l'Ambassadeur.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Your Excellency, Mr. President, dear guests, we have reached the end of our discussion. Before closing, I would like to give the floor to the presenters for 1 minute to respond. Please adhere to the 1 minute time given to you. 1 minute to each of the presenter for the closing session. Thank you.
For the very rich contributions. I want to respond to two questions that were raised. I think the one, Your Honor, from Kenya, about religious values versus the law. One of the initiatives that I know has happened with the United Nations agencies working with our governments has been the issue of the harmonization of law and practice, law and customary law. And I think this is something that is very common, where the law is ignored to custom, or custom is held as much of greater prominence than the law itself. And the need to harmonize it becomes a major issue that we have to actually put on the table, because what prevails in terms of this issue of law and practice. And there are examples of countries where there has been a process of harmonization of law and custom. And that's something that has to be taken up by the Pan-African Parliament, not to assume that once we pass a law, then that means that the practice automatically happens. And I know it's not an easy one, but it's an important one. And it's one that we have a lot of focus on. Social norms and values and customs is a big area that we're working on, and therefore working with traditional leaders. And we have, as you know, the Council of Traditional Leaders of Africa, and the work with the Council of Traditional Leaders of Africa with our sister UN agencies, UNFPA and UN Women, is designed to really work with those issues of how customary law reinforces patriarchy and the gender inequality. And that's something that perhaps we need to have a sitting between the Pan-African Parliament and the Council of Traditional Leaders together to talk about how to harmonize this law from country to country. So that, I think, is one.
Merci.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Let me now give the floor to Mr. Remy. I'm giving you 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I think just two things I want to highlight. The first issue from, I think, the Honorable Member from South Africa, you raised a very important question of, why should we celebrate International Women's Day? Especially considering what we know and what women are going through. 45% of women have experienced violence in their lifetime. 1 in 3 will experience violence in their lifetime in Africa. But I think that this day reminds us of those realities and creates awareness and a call to action. And I hope that in the October conference, perhaps you could look at some of the good practices that are working in empowering women and girls in our region. And then lastly, I think it was a comment from Zambia, the best country in the world. And that comment and that comment was, I think, women don't support each other. And then there was also another comment that girls don't like STEM or mathematics and science in class. I'd like for us to interrogate these two arguments and the role of patriarchy and gender norms in influencing this in our society. So you find that that's not because of biology or anything, it's because society pushes girls not to go into STEM, raises them to go into, secretarial duties and so on. And it is a society that claims that women do not support each other because of patriarchy. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Remy.
Thank you very much. Honorable Khadija has the floor.
الوعي الذي أبانت عليه المداخلات وعلى الالتفاف حول إنصاف المرأة.
Thank you very much. We focused on awareness, and we need to support the journey of women. I would like for us every year to celebrate this day. In fact, one of the participants asked the following question: what is the role played by PAP in the field of gender? In fact, we have an awareness program, an adaptation or rather harmonization program for laws, local laws with international agreements. We need to encourage African countries to sign international agreements. I now give the floor to Mrs. Beja. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, presenters, for your comments. In fact, I support the observations made by the participant from Zambia. He spoke about solidarity between women. In fact, the strength of women resides in the solidarity between all women. I'm addressing the representative from Sudan. In fact, Africa would like you to join us in the Pan-African Parliament. I thank Amina Tijani for having organized the ceremony, and I would like to thank the President of the Pan-African Parliament for having coordinated the ceremony celebrating International Women's Day. Please allow me to thank Mrs. Han, in fact, on behalf of the Pan-African Parliament and on behalf of the Bureau of the Women's Caucus. I would like to thank Mrs. Remy and Mrs. Anne for their availability. Now we are going to the closing session. I should like to invite to the podium Professor Masuda, first Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament, and Honorable Lucia Maria Mendes Goncalves dos Passos, third Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament, and also the two Vice Chairs of the Women's Caucus for the closing session. Please take your seats, ladies.
Madame Caroline,
Mrs. Caroline, Mrs. Victoria,
merci à tout le monde, mon rôle est déjà...
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Mrs. Wawa to begin the closing session.
I think I'm just going to do it very quickly. I would like to invite Honorable Caroline Kamusime, which is, Honorable is the first Vice President of the Women Caucus. Honorable. She will deliver a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Madam Wawa. The Honorable President, Pan-African Parliament, the Vice President, and the Bureau members of Pan-African Parliament, the President and Vice President of PAP Women's Caucus, the Dean of Diplomat Corps, and all ambassadors present. The UN Secretary General, the Regional Director, Representative, UNAIDS, the representative, UNESCO, the honorable members of Parliament, invited guests. On my own behalf, and on behalf of Women's Caucus, and on my own behalf, I would like to thank the President of Pan-African Parliament in a special way for being with us, and this is the second time. Whenever there is a function for women, you've never left us behind. Thank you so much. We can't take it for granted, and all the Bureau members. Our gratitude goes to the UN Secretary General for honoring with an online present and a video message. Having received presentations from our distinguished guests, speakers, and representatives from UNAIDS and UNESCO, allow me on equal terms to thank them and their good messages. We are grateful to have you here, and we can't take it for granted, sharing your knowledge, findings, opinions with us, and for giving us an excellent coverage of topics discussed here today. I can assure you that we have all gained a lot from your presentations. As we all know, this year's International Women's Day theme for an inclusive digital world, innovation, technologies, and gender equality. It emphasizes the need for inclusive and transformative technology and innovations where women themselves have opportunity to create and harness new solutions that offer fresh perspectives to difficult problems. Innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship are engineers for advancing gender equality and women's empowerment by creating women's access to education and socio-economic opportunities. Bridging women and other marginalized groups into technology results in more creative solutions, has greater potential and innovations that meet women's needs and promote gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, your presence here today is indeed a testament of your determination and work hard. Bridging the gender divide by making the internet accessible to all, including women, promoting training opportunities for women, and taking steps to encourage their entry into the field of science and technology, promoting measurements and advance public education awareness against negative culture norms that hinder women and girls to participate in science and technology. Like one of my colleagues commented, we need to encourage our girls and women. Members of Pan-African Parliament and our guests, we appreciate the hospitality of the people of South Africa, and we say thank you. We can't take it for granted. Whenever we are here, we really appreciate. Thank you, Government of South Africa. Once again, I would like to state that we are grateful and we are grateful to our speakers, and we thank you for being here with us. It has been a great pleasure, and we wish you all journey masses as you return to your respective destinations. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Merci, Honorable, pour votre mot de remerciement.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for your vote of thanks. I should like to invite the third Vice President of the Pan-African Parliament, Honorable Lucia Maria Mendes Gonçalves dos Passos, to deliver the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. Your Excellency, the President of the Pan-African Parliament, Fortune Chirambira, Honorables here present, the President of the Women's Caucus of the Pan-African Parliament, Amina Tijani Yahya, the Ambassador of Egypt, representatives of the European Parliament, representatives of the United Nations and its various agencies, the clerk of the Pan-African Parliament, all panelists, and all here present. Good afternoon to everybody. We are closing this very important International Women's Day and its celebration here at the Pan-African Parliament. This day was organized by the Women's Caucus, who we'd like to thank for this excellent initiative, as well as all those that were involved with the organization of this day. This day symbolizes the struggle of women for liberty, freedom, and their fight against all the assumptions and preconceptions which prevent them from being able to take their place equally together with men in all sectors of society. It also symbolizes the struggle of women against machismo, against genocide, against violence, against salary discrimination, and all types of other forms of inequality. Today, this day is dedicated to all the young girls and women who have been fighting to take their place in the destiny of mankind and humankind in order to ensure greater solidarity. The theme for this year was for an inclusive digital world, innovation and technologies for gender equality. And this theme focuses on ensuring that women and young girls can take on this world with courage, with all their tenderness, and ensure that they can involve themselves with the necessary emotion and the necessary intellect on the digital world, and ensure that they can, in that sector as well, ensure gender equality. A society can never be thoroughly developed if it doesn't recognize the value and the contribution of women for the development of that nation and the building of the nation. The colleagues that participated in today's celebrations did focus on how important it is to ensure women's technological development as well as the technological development of our young girls. And we need to make a continuous commitment to ensure that we overcome all constraints that have been preventing women from taking on the area of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Parliamentarians, we need to use our parliamentary diplomacy to ensure the greater inclusion of women in digital spheres. And all honorables here present need to ensure that governments and all those that are accountable for the budgets of the countries to dedicate funds for the development, the promotion of gender equality, as well as the inclusion of digital innovation and technologies for women in their countries. It's important to adopt more inclusive policies that can promote equality and gender parity, that can promote respect for human rights for this half of the world's population. It is true that the COVID pandemic did marginalize especially the poorer women and children, and has left them without access to education because they didn't have access to internet or to energy and power. However, the COVID pandemic also provided an opportunity for thousands of women who were able to create their own businesses through the internet from the space of their homes. It is important for us to encourage young women to have access to children, to schools, and to have access to technologies in the schools. And so we need to make a commitment as parliamentarians here today that we will be accountable for ensuring that our voice is heard and that our voice will be heard by the Secretary General of the UN to ensure that women are respected. And he did say that any sort of gender discrimination puts at risk the lives of girls and women. So it's important for us to invoke our fundamental human rights, because if we don't do that, we will pay the highest price. It's important to ensure protection against sexual abuse and sexual exploitation, especially of minors, as well as the sexual exploitation of minors and of girls and women online. We need to fight against early marriage, female genital mutilation, and we need to ensure greater empowerment of women. And in this regard, I'd like to share with you the fact that we are very happy as women because of all the outcomes of the interparliamentary meeting on the 6th of March, which informed us that countries such as Rwanda, South Africa, Mozambique, and others are now part of the 15 countries in the world that have got the highest level of women participation in government. And Africa has got a women's participation in government rate that is higher than that of Europe. And so we need to continue working in this area, ensuring that young girls will have access to the education, to the means and the services that are necessary for them to be able to grow fully and reach their potential. And so in this regard, the role of innovation technology is essential, because technology and digital technologies will ensure that women have got greater opportunities. Today, women represent less than a third of the people that are working in science and technology, engineering and maths, the STEM areas, and this is unthinkable. However, it is much better than before the creation of the Women's Pan-African Organization. However, it is important to ensure that new technologies can, from the beginning, fight against discrimination. And it's important for us to involve digital technologies from the beginning to ensure that we can have more women and girls participating in STEM. During the last 10 years, the exclusion of women in STEM cost $1 trillion of GDP. So $1 trillion of GDP that was lost in low and medium income countries, many of which are in our African continent. So if we do not control the situation, the loss can lead to $1.5 trillion until 2025. So we need to ensure the participation of women in STEM. The loss of all this money should serve as a warning to all of us that we need, as parliamentarians, to focus on promoting the place of women in STEM, and that our governments have to invest more in the women and girls' education in digital technology so that they can take their place on STEM. And we need to work together with the government, the private sector, the civil society, all our bilateral and multilateral partners to ensure that we can build a society that is more inclusive and an Africa that is much more prosperous for all our common good. So, long live Africa, long live women. And I'd like to wish all of you a great International Women's Day. Thank you very much, and thank you for participating in our activities, and I declare this day closed.
Merci beaucoup, Honorable.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I just have one announcement to make. We would like to thank you for having attended this celebration. We would like to invite you outside the plenary room to take a family photo. After that, there will be some refreshments offered in the lobby. Once again, I would like to say that the participation was very, very interactive. We have more than 20 embassies represented here this afternoon and 160 participants. Thank you.